"Whoever you are," said a woman's voice, somewhere above him in the dark, "you have crawled into my fold with the ewes, and if you have brought the dog's quarrel up here with you, I shall want to know about it before I bring you in." The Duke of Llanfair, lying on his side on trodden straw with one arm not working, and the whole left side of his head singing like a struck bell, opened the eye that would open and said, "Water, please." He remembered very little of the 4 hours before that, and never afterward recovered much of it. He had been riding the mountain road down from Cumbach at dusk, with a leather case strapped under his coat. There had been 3 men at the turn where the road narrows above the gully, and they had not been robbers, because robbers do not know a man's name, and one of them had said his name. He remembered the horse going down. He remembered being certain, with a strange detachment, that they intended him to be found at the bottom of the gully in the morning, looking like a man whose horse had failed on a bad road. He remembered that they took his ring and the case, and that he had lain in the wet bracken counting to 200 after the hoofbeats stopped before he moved at all. And he remembered the light. One yellow window, very high and far off across the slope, which he had crawled toward for what he later worked out was better than a mile, mostly on his knees and elbows, stopping when the ground swung, and it had not been a window at all in the end, but the lantern hanging in the doorway of a stone sheepfold on the open hill. The woman brought water in a horn cup and held it for him because his hands would not. "Slow, you will be sick if you go at it." She had a plaid over her shoulders and her sleeves rolled, and there was straw in her hair and blood on her hands, none of it his, and he understood dimly that he had crawled into the middle of lambing. "Can you tell me your name?" He looked up at her. Somewhere under the ringing, a very old and very careful instinct came awake and told him, in the voice his father had used for a state business, that 3 men had left him for dead within 11 miles of his own house, and that they had known who he was, and that until he could stand up, he had better not be anybody. "Tryst," he said. "Tryst what?" "Just Tryst, for now." He got the rest out with difficulty. "I was pulled off a horse on the mountain road by 3 men who took what I carried. I am no danger to you and no quarrel of yours, and if you turn me out I shall not blame you, but I would ask you not to send word down to the valley for a day or 2. Not to anyone." The woman was quiet for a moment, looking at him with the frankest, steadiest gray eyes he had ever been examined by. "I am Nesta Yarrow," she said. "There is nobody in the valley I would send word to in any case, and I have 22 ewes to bring in tonight, so you will keep. Can you get to the house if I take your good side?" He could not, but between them they managed it, and it took nearly an hour to cross 40 yards. Her house was 1 room and a loft, with a fire in the middle of the end wall and a dresser with 4 plates on it, and a bed in the corner that she did not offer him and he did not expect. She put him on the settle bed by the fire with a folded sheepskin under his shoulder and looked at his arm, which was out at the shoulder, and told him what she was going to do about it. "I have done this to my husband twice and to my father once. It will be very bad for a count of 5. "Do it." She did it. It was very bad for a count of 5. Then it was, astonishingly, better, and he lay sweating in the firelight while she wrapped the arm across his chest with a strip of clean sacking and washed the side of his head where the ground had taken the skin off, and never once asked him a question he had already declined to answer. He was in that room for 5 weeks. The first of them he could not have described. There was fever in it, and rain on the slates, and a lamb in a basket by the fire that had to be fed with a horn every 2 hours through 2 nights, and he remembered waking at 3 in the morning to find her asleep sitting up on the floor with her back against the settle, and the horn still in her hand. In the second week he could sit. In the third he could get to the door and hold it, and look out at the whole of the valley laid below him in wet green folds, and see, 11 miles off and small as a die, the grey roofs of Llanfair. She caught him looking. "That is the great house," said Nesta. "Llanfair the Duke's." "Yes." "Have you ever seen him?" Tristan Lewes, 9th Duke of Llanfair, leaned against his own door frame in a dead shepherd's shirt and said, "Once or twice." "They say he is a hard man. He put the Cwm Bach mine to law last year, and half the valley said he was ruining trade, and the other half said the props were rotten and men were dying of it." She was cutting bread and did not look up. "My husband was in that mine 2 years ago in the spring. The props were rotten." He did not say anything at all for some time. "I am sorry," he said at last, and meant it in a way he had not known how to mean it in 11 years of writing condolence letters in a fair hand. So was everybody. She put the bread down. There were 4 of them and one was 17. The company paid £9 to each family and called it charity, and then the agent came round and said we might have the money or the cottage but not the two, and I took the money and came up here to my father's fold, and I have 22 ewes and a good dog, and I owe not a penny to anyone living. She set a plate beside him. "So no, I do not think the Duke is a hard man. I think he is the only man between here and Caernarfon who read the report and did something, and I think he made an enemy of every shareholder in that company doing it, and I have said so out loud in the chapel and been looked at for it. Eat." He ate. He mended slowly, and he was not idle, because she would not have tolerated it, and because he discovered in himself an appetite he had not known he possessed. By the 4th week, he could mend a wall with one arm and a knee. He learned to hold a ewe. He learned that a lamb must be got to suck within the hour or you will lose it. He was shown how to tell her 22 apart and got it wrong, and was mocked for it with such gentle thoroughness that he laughed until his shoulder hurt. They talked in the evenings. He told her the truth about everything except his name, about the men on the road, and the case they had taken, and what had been in it. A signed and witnessed deed of transfer conveying the Cwm Bach workings out of the company's hands and into a trust for the men who worked them, which he had been carrying home from an attorney in Cwm Bach to be lodged with his own people, and which had cost him 14 months and the goodwill of every relation he had. "Who wanted it gone?" said Nesta. "3 shareholders at a guess," said Tristan, "and my cousin, who is my heir, and who has borrowed a great deal of money against a future he was quite confident of." "Then he thinks you are dead." "He is telling everyone I am dead. He must be by now. It is nearly a month." She looked into the fire for a while. "And are you going to let him?" "For a little longer," said the Duke of Llanfair. "A dead man's cousin says a great many careless things at a funeral, Nesta. I should like him to have every chance." The chance came on a Thursday, in the shape of a boy driving 4 sheep up the track, who stopped to tell Nesta Yarrow the news of the valley, because there was nobody else on that hill to tell. The Duke was dead on the mountain road above Cwm Bach, thrown from his horse in the dark, his body not recovered, the gully being what it was, and there was to be a service for him in Llanfair Church on Sunday morning at 11, and the new Duke had ordered black cloth for the whole household, and a dinner afterward for the tenants. Tristan heard it from the doorway, with a mending hammer in his good hand. When the boy had gone he came in and sat down on the settle and said, "Nesta, sit down, please. I am going to tell you the thing I have not told you, and you will be angry, and you will be right." She sat. "My name is Tristan Lewes. I am the Duke of Llanfair. It is my own funeral on Sunday, and my cousin Maddox is ordering the black cloth, and I have been lying on your settle for 5 weeks in your husband's shirt, letting you believe I was a man called Tryst who fell off a horse. Nesta Yarrow did not move for a long moment. The fire ticked. "You let me talk about the mine," she said. "Yes." "You let me stand there and say to your face that the Duke was the only man between here and Caernarfon who did anything, and you said nothing." "I said nothing because if I had spoken you would have gone down to the valley within the hour to fetch help for me, out of plain decency, and whoever you spoke to would have spoken to somebody else, and by nightfall 3 men would have known that I was alive and where. I was not able to stand up, Nesta. I could not protect you and I could not protect myself, and so I lied to you in your own house, and it was the safest thing and it was still a lie." He put the hammer down. "I am not going to pretend it was for your sake alone. Some of it was that I have not been spoken to like a man in 11 years, and I did not want it to stop. That was for me." She got up and went to the door and stood there with her back to him, for the space of perhaps 20 breaths, looking down the valley at the gray roofs. "I washed your head," she said. "I put your arm back in. I told you about my husband." "I know." "You will go on Sunday, then." "I shall go on Sunday. And afterward there will be lawyers and magistrates and a great deal of talk, and men will come up this track in good coats, asking a widow on a hill what she knows, and the whole valley will say the Yarrow woman had a duke in her house for 5 weeks. She turned round, and her chin was up, and her eyes were bright and furious and entirely dry. "I have kept my name clean on £9 a year, your grace. It is the only thing I brought up this hill besides the ewes." Tristan Luz stood up slowly, and it cost him. "Then hear the rest before you decide what I am," he said. "On Sunday I shall walk into that church, and the first thing I shall say, before I say anything about my cousin, is where I have been. I shall say it to the whole parish. That I was left on the mountain and crawled a mile to a sheepfold, and that Mrs. Nesta Yarrow of Sephan Uchaf took in a man with no name and put his shoulder back and sat up 2 nights with a lamb and asked me nothing, and that I owe her my life, and that any person who makes a word of it into anything else will answer to me personally, in this world, at length." He paused. "And then I shall go away and not come back up this hill, unless you send for me. That part is yours. It has been yours since the night I came into the fold, and you asked me whether I had brought a quarrel with me." She looked at him for a long time. "Take the shirt," she said at last. "You cannot walk into a church in that shirt. There is a coat of my father's in the chest, and it will be too small and it will have to do." He walked into Llanfair Church on Sunday morning at 11, in a dead shepherd's coat too small in the shoulder, with his arms still bound across his chest, up the aisle of a building draped in black cloth, past 400 people, to the front pew where his cousin Maddox Luz was sitting with a handkerchief in his hand. He never forgot the sound the church made. It was not a scream. It was 400 people breathing in. He told them where he had been, first, exactly as he had promised, and he named her, and he said what he had said he would say, and the parish heard it in absolute silence. The rest took 3 months, and was mostly the business of attorneys. The deed survived, because a careful old man in Cumbach had made a counterpart, and kept it in his own strong box, a habit he had been mocked for all his professional life. The signet ring turned up in a silversmith's in Caernarfon, and the silversmith remembered the man who brought it, and the man who brought it, on being invited to consider his position, remembered a great deal more than anyone had expected, including the name of the person who had paid for the horses. Maddox Luz sailed for Boston in September with the whole of what he had left, which was not much, and did not stand trial, which was a disappointment to the valley and a relief to Tristan, who had discovered that he had no appetite whatever for ruining the last of his own blood, only for stopping him. 2 shareholders in the Cumbach company were bound over at the assizes. The workings passed into the trust in October, 11 trustees, 7 of them working men, and new props throughout by Christmas, and a fund for the 4 families, which the Duke of Llanfair signed with his left hand, because the right one was still not quite what it had been. He did not go up the hill, not in June when he wanted to, not in August when it was very bad, not in October when the trust was signed and he had nobody to tell. In November, a boy came to the great house with a message written on the back of a bill of sale, in a careful, unpracticed hand. There is a wall down at the top fold, and I cannot lift the stones alone. In Yarrow. He rode out within 20 minutes and mended the wall in the rain, and it took 4 hours, and she brought bread and cheese out to him at the 2nd hour, and stayed to hold the stones, and they said almost nothing until it was done. Then in the doorway with the light going he said, "Nesta, may I say the thing now? You had better, before you are wet through. I want to marry you." He held up his good hand before she could speak. "And I want you to hear the shape of it before you answer, because I have had 6 months to think about it, and I have thought of nothing else. I am not asking you to sell your ewes. Sephan Uchaf is yours. I have had it looked into, and your father's lease is a life lease, and I could not take it from you if I wished. If you marry me, you will keep it in your own name, and you will come up here whenever you please, and if you tell me that Llanfair is too big and too cold and too full of portraits, then we shall spend half the year in this room and I shall be perfectly content, because I have lived in this room and I was happier in it than I have ever been in mine." He stopped. "I do not want a duchess, Nesta. I have no use for one. I want the woman who asked a bleeding stranger whether he had brought a quarrel into her fold, before she asked whether he could pay." Nesta Yarrow leaned against the door frame and folded her arms, and he saw with a lurch that she was crying at last, 5 weeks and 6 months too late, and laughing at the same time. "Tristan lose," she said. "You have mended that wall wrong. The big stone goes at the bottom." "Then I shall do it again tomorrow." "You will do it again tomorrow," she agreed. "And every year, because it comes down every year, and if you are going to be my husband, you may as well learn how." They were married in the chapel at Bach in the spring, among the Mine families, and the 17-year-old boy's mother sat in the front pew at the bride's own request. There is a strip of clean sacking, washed and folded, in a glass case in the library at Llanfair, between the family's charters and the deed of the Bach Trust. Visitors take it for a relic of some battle, and in a sense they are not wrong. The Duke tells them it is the sling a shepherd's widow made for his shoulder on the night he crawled into her fold with no name, no ring, and nothing to recommend him, and that he has been in her debt ever since, and that she reminds him of it, thoroughly and by name, every time he sets a stone in the wrong place.